Let's record here. Awesome. I see that Benjamin is having some troubles to connect in audio, but I think hopefully he's connected right now. Perfect. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Miguel Cortines. I'm president of the Canadian Council for the Americas, Alberta, and it's my privilege this morning to host this Qué Pasa in Mexico webinar. We are very excited about all the potential, the opportunities that Mexico and Latin America brings to Canadian companies, and I think we are in a very, very exciting moment. As you know, many things are happening in the world, many things are happening with our neighbors in the south, and I think right now Latin America represents a lot of significant opportunities for Canadian companies just to diversify markets, to expand, to explore options. This is not a new relationship. Has been CCA has been working for almost 35 years right now, 32, 33 years right now, supporting Canadian companies, Alberta companies in particular, just to explore and to create connections with Latin America. It's an organization that I'm very proud of CCA and all the work that we do, and with the support of the membership, the support of many organizations, the support of the government, federal, provincial, and local. So we have been able to organize and put together different activities with Latin America for many years. I think in some way the relation, well, I feel that the relationship was like a little bit not very active as it should be, because usually when we are working with Canadian companies, sometimes it has been a trend that for Canadian companies it's very easy to go to the US market, right? It's a natural market, it's a very cultural, very affiliated market. But right now, I think there is a great opportunity for Canadian companies, and I think this is a message that I want to emphasize a lot to all our members or new members of the CCA. I think this is a great opportunity to explore Latin America as an opportunity. Mexico today in particular, but also there are different opportunities around the continent. So, and this is the idea of this seminar today, and we are going to start just with the conversations. I'm very thankful for all the speakers that accept the invitation to be with us today, and thank you to Julie POIRIER with the Global Affairs Canada, to Shannon McCarthy with the Alberta Mexico office in Mexico City, to Leonardo Beltran with the Institute of Americas and different initiatives, Mariana Rafael with Connecting Mexico, Benjamin TORRES-BARRON with Baker McKenzie, and here as well with us is Michael Burak with the CCA Board of Directors. And so today, basically, we are going to start the presentations. You are very welcome to put your questions in the Q&A chat. And at some point, we are going to bring this question. We are going to try to summarize if we have questions with similar themes, so bring the more relevant questions. So please feel free to interact. We want to be this an interactive session. And with that, we are going to start with the different panels. We are going to start today with Julie POIRIER. She's an economist and trade specialist with extensive experience in global markets and trade policy. Julie has a Bachelor in Honors in Economics by McGill University and a Master's in International Management. She's currently serves as the Canadian Embassy. She serves in the Canadian Embassy in Mexico as Councillor for Trade Policy, and she oversees different sectors like automotive, advanced manufacturing, clean tech, energy sectors. And with that, I just want to say hello to Julie, and go ahead, please.
Thank you, Miguel. Muchas gracias. Buenas tardes. Bonjour à tous. C'est vraiment un plaisir de vous parler d'ici de Mexico. So I was asked sort of, and it's really an honor to be part of this group of panelists. And we have a number, so I'll just touch on a few points to give you the panorama of what's been going on in Mexico, more from a geopolitical, like broader angle, and hopefully will leave you wanting more, and very happy to respond to any questions later on and interact with the audience. So I thought of just touching three key points. First, Mexico in and of itself, what has been going on in the past few months, and just making abstraction just for a minute of the rest of the world, and in particular what's going on in the United States, just to focus on Mexico like a bubble. So that sometimes it feels good to do just that. So Mexico and all the changes that we've seen, then Mexico and the US, and then Mexico and Canada. So very quickly, Mexico in and of itself, so a new president since October 2024, from the same Morena party as her predecessor, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, but with really a shift we're seeing, a shift towards the better in terms of Canadian interest. Because so her predecessor was President Sheinbaum's predecessor was very populist, with the distrust of the private sector, a very ambitious and controversial reform agenda that was just charging ahead. With President Sheinbaum, we're seeing change. So yes, the controversial reform agenda is going ahead, but with more measure and consultation than before. And I'm sure that colleagues on the panel, Leonardo, Benjamin, will touch on that, notably on the energy side of things. And with a relationship with the private sector that is completely renewed. The president has surrounded herself by some advisors. Altagracia Gomez, a well-known business person, for example. She's the president closer to the business associations, and she's more open to having a renewed relationship with foreign investors. We saw the US-Mexico CEO dialogue back in the fall, the Canada-Mexico CEO dialogue in January. So really an openness that really was lacking for the past 6 years. So those are very good signals. Now moving on to Mexico and the US. Mexico is using basically the same playbook as for Trump 1.0 to collaborate on security and migration, and hope that everything related to trade tariffs just goes away. And in that, it's an approach that is completely different than the one that Canada has taken. Canada has responded more forcefully with tariffs. So, time will tell which approach works better. But for now, both countries, Canada and Mexico, have the same results, a reprieve on tariffs, but until April 2nd, but the imposition of tariffs on steel and aluminum. So Mexico is just hoping that time and dialogue will work in its favor. And yeah, we'll see. In all this, the US is very likely, again, to try to divide Canada and Mexico. We're already seeing, of course, Canada, trying to focus on its relationship with the US as the most important one, and similarly Mexico with the US, and that's understandable. But that said, it's quite clear in our engagement that both countries, Canada and Mexico, share the view that the trilateral approach will work best and reflects the deep integration that we have within the region. But just to flag that the reality will test our resolve to work together. And that's a good segue, actually, to the relationship between Mexico and Canada. In the past 6 years, I mentioned President AMLO made it difficult to engage. So it's been a difficult past 6 years, I would say. There was also the reimposition by Canada of visas towards Mexican nationals last year, a measure that was needed to curb some abuse by Mexican nationals, but others, abuse of Canada's refugee system. So, but of course, you know, it's always a difficult time to pass between two partners. And you're probably aware or will remember some comments made by provincial premiers late last year, suggesting that, you know, we needed to focus on US and that Mexico, we could have them out of CUSMA or USMCA, and that didn't matter. So of course that left a mark, and we're trying to counterbalance that with renewed engagement at the federal level, with all ministers, external affairs, trade, and industry notably, and as well at the working level. And I have to say, at the working level, we're really continuing to work very closely with Mexico, because at the end of the day, our interests are closely linked. And our integration, as we hear it all the time, is so deeply, you know, present in all supply chains, that we cannot not collaborate with Mexico. This is the thing that makes the most sense from a strategic perspective for Canada. So we're really now, and we have a new prime minister, like this will all provide the basis for a renewed engagement. So we're really seeing some good dynamic there. And in all this, we'll be very mindful that, you know, we're in this together. The choppy waters will affect both Canada and Mexico equally, maybe differently, but to the same extent. And the best way to get out of it will be to work together. So just in a conclusion, what's the silver lining in all this? Really and Miguel alluded to that a bit earlier, but Canada, Mexico, like we have this big country in between us, and sometimes we forget about each other. So in the current context, it's an opportunity, and we're seeing it, a renewed interest for one another. We're seeing Canadian companies contacting us here at the embassy, the Trade Commissioner Service, more saying, well, now that I don't have the US, like I'm looking to diversify, and Mexico seems like the next just option that makes the most sense, given, you know, we have the USMCA, but we have also the CPTPP, there's the geographical proximity, so it makes a lot of sense. So a renewed interest that we're really seeing now, and I'm really glad that Miguel has put together this event, because it's a good also proof of renewed interest we're seeing. Second, a renewed openness in Mexico to improve local investment and trade environment. You'll hear it with respect to like Plan Mexico, for example, that Mariana, I think, will touch upon. And this is opening up opportunities for Canadian companies. We're seeing it notably Plan Mexico I mentioned, but also clean tech, infrastructure, manufacturing, water, a number of sectors, and agriculture and agri-food, of course. So a number of sectors that are seeing some renewed dynamism. So I'll stop here if that's okay, and then happy to answer any questions later on.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Julie. Thank you very much for that. And we are going to continue right now from the government perspective of the government of Alberta. Here is with us Shannon McCarthy. She joined the government of Alberta in February 2023 as the managing director for the Alberta Mexico office, covering Mexico, Central, South America, and the Caribbean. Shannon brings a different experience. Oh my goodness, I lost my... Anyway, Shannon is a a lot of experience working with government, and right now with this important position, and I think right now more relevant than ever. And thank you, Shannon, for sharing, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Miguel, and thank you to the Canadian Council of the Americas in Alberta for hosting this webinar and bringing this to the attention of our exporters, because we definitely get to think about what the opportunities are further south. So as Miguel mentioned, I'm the representative for Alberta in Mexico. We are co-located in the Canadian Embassy in Mexico City. We have a team of 5, and from here we cover Mexico, Central South America, and the Caribbean. Julie and I are actually sitting in the same building right now, and we work as part of Team Canada in order to look for opportunities for all of the Canadian exporters that we have. I was supposed to be covering, and I will cover, what are the opportunities for Albertan companies into Mexico? And the truth is that with a country of nearly 130 million people, there are bound to be opportunities. It's just a matter of finding them. And we've talked about the country in between Canada and Mexico, and I like to refer to it as, I say in Spanish, it's the como colchón gigante. So it's like the giant pillow mattress in between Canada and Mexico, and we have the opportunity to potentially jump on it to get over to Mexico and think about what those opportunities are. As Julie mentioned, we do have companies that are already looking to diversify, and it's really important to know where the resources are to investigate and do the proper due diligence to see what the opportunities you can realize in a market. And so you have Global Affairs Canada and the Trade Commissioner Service, and you have the Government of Alberta representatives. We have 16 offices in the world, and from our office here, we have one person who's entirely focused on agriculture, and then we have the rest of the team that work on the sectors. When we look at what we have as strengths in Alberta, I can see we have representatives from the energy sector and from agriculture as participants today. We also have, I think I saw a university down there. There are many opportunities in these sectors. We have a lot in common with Mexico. And so it's just a matter of finding the right fit and doing your homework. And that's where we can help you to make sure that you are best prepared, because it's not the same as going into the US. But I think what we'll realize is that in some ways, it's more familiar than going into the US with any products or services that you're exploring opportunities for. And I think that we had agreed to just do a little introduction. I don't know, Miguel, if I should go into this further, but I think that for us, the opportunities that we're most focused on at the moment are definitely encouraging our suppliers and service providers in the energy sectors. There is some movement there, and there's certainly demand for infrastructure. Clean technologies, because we have a strength in Alberta in clean technologies and managing resources, this is something that we share in common with Mexico and can explore, whether it be export or finding partnerships with Mexican firms. And of course, agriculture and agri-food, these are also strengths that we share with Mexico. So there are opportunities for identifying niche markets for Alberta exporters. And I think I'll stop there, and of course, open to all the questions and look forward to seeing my fellow panelists.
Thank you, Shannon. That's excellent. Thank you very much. Well, we hear right now the government perspectives. Right now, we are going to move a little bit to the industry, and I'm going to start right now with Mariana Rafael. Mariana Rafael is the General Director of Connecting Mexico and Director of Institutional Relations at Grupo Estrategia Política. Connecting Mexico, a sister company of GEP, focuses on investment by helping companies navigate opportunities and assess political and regulatory risks in Mexico. Previously, she held various roles at GEP, where she built an international network across Latin America, strengthening relations with US, Europe, and Africa. She worked in the Mexican Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the World Bank, and the Wilson Center. That I heard very bad news today about the Wilson Center by the Trump administration, but that's another topic. She's a young associate at COMEXI, contributing to projects on Mexico-US relations and North America prosperity. Mariana holds a master's in public policy from Georgia University. And welcome, Mariana. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Miguel. Thank you for inviting me to this event. It's great to be here with all my panelists, and thank you to everyone that joined. So I was asked to talk about what is the government of Mexico doing and how is the industry seeing that. Talking before this panel, we thought that discussing Plan Mexico would be a very good idea because it has been the long-term roadmap that the Mexican government has presented to deal with the situation that we're living in right now. Even if when it started before, and it was started, they started building it before Donald Trump got into office, I think it appeals to what we all need to know about how we should move, and from what Julie and Shannon were both mentioning, how we need to work together as a region, and of course, how we can see of opportunities that are there for Mexico and Canada. So this plan was presented on January 13th at the beginning of this year. And the main issue of the main objective of the Plan Mexico is to boost the country's economic development through collaboration. And here they highlight collaboration as an important topic. That, as Julie was mentioning, is something that has changed in a big way compared to the previous administration. We are seeing more closeness to the private sector, to academia, to different stakeholders, and they realize that we need this for the Plan Mexico to be a success and to be something that we can rely on in the medium and long term. So what we're trying to say, and what we are reading from the industry here in Mexico, is that Mexico wants to be a team player by actually making this a reality. For it, as different from what we've seen in the past, this has very clear actions and objectives that we are starting to see. We are seeing metrics that are important for the business sector and for the society in general. It's not just a plan, but it's something that we have very specific things. We have the nearshoring decree, the Polos del Bienestar. It targets specific industries, and it wants to address some of the main opportunities that we have. So, for example, among the strategic sectors that are seen in the Plan Mexico, we have automotive and electromobility, semiconductors, pharmaceutical, chemical and petrochemical, aerospace, textile and footwear, agribusiness, and consumer goods. So here it's also important to say that they are making a mapping, of how things look like, and there we can think how we can take an opportunity for this to make this plan an actual advantage for companies that are looking to invest in Mexico. So of course, depending on the investment and how and what the nature of the investment is, the amount of the investment, etc., you can look at different benefits. But we are seeing, starting to see that some companies are liking this. Even President Sheinbaum inaugurated this new part of her morning press conference on Thursdays, talking about announcing new investments, trying to send a message and saying business are still looking to invest in Mexico, regardless of the narrative that we might see coming from the US. And some of these companies are international companies. So it's also a message of saying things can work. And yeah, there are things that we still need to know, for example, how the tariffs are going to look like on April 2nd, but we are doing some other things. And another thing that I really like about the Plan Mexico is that it not only focuses on trade, but also on what trade needs to happen. So for example, it also includes the education part, which is very important, the implementation of dual education programs, which are something that we need in order for any industry that wants to come here or anywhere. We need to think of the workforce and what else do companies need besides an incentive or a place where they can put a plant. We need to have the whole ecosystem, and that's what they are trying to say. So I think that in the end, Plan Mexico has like two main things. One, it does want to say we welcome private investment and we want to strengthen the North American region, as that may look like. And of course, in that, it's important to highlight that Mexico and Canada need to work also together. And it's not just the US, as we sometimes think, because as you've mentioned before, it's there in the middle, and we need to be able to diversify and to look into more opportunities than what we're used to. And then it's also an important initiative looking a little more beyond the North American region and beyond just Mexico, the US, and Canada, but it's also addressing some of the concerns that we have, for example, with China, some of the concerns that both Canada and the US also have regarding China, and how we can play this part, how we can replace some imports or how we can make the supply chains look a little differently in benefit of the region and of course of the citizens of the three countries. So in general terms, that's what we are seeing. As I think Julie mentioned, there are very important actors that are leading this. So there's of course Marcelo Ebrard, the Secretary of Economy, who has been very open with the private sector and to make these things happen. But also, of course, Altagracia Gomez has been key in making this happening, in actually sitting with companies to understand what their needs are and to make this dialogue to come into a reality in specific projects. So I think these changes are very important and are good for the private sector. The private sector, regardless of all the uncertainty that's going on because of the US trade policy, feels that they do have an open door to have conversations with the government. And I think that's very important news and a very good change from what we saw for the past 6 years. So Miguel, if it's all right, I'll leave it here and leave more time for questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Mariana. And right now we are going to continue. We're going to focus more in the energy sector with Leonardo and Benjamin. But I'm going to introduce Leonardo Beltran. He's a non-resident fellow with the Energy Transition and Climate Program at the Inter-American Dialogue. A seasoned energy professional with more than 20 years of experience. Mr. Beltran is the advisory group chair of the Evaluation and Learning Initiative for the Climate Investment Funds, a member of the board for Mexico Foundation, a member of the Technical Advisory Group in the World Bank, working in the Industry Transition Intelligence Advisory Board. He's an amazing curriculum. He's a non-resident fellow at the Center for Global Energy at the University of Columbia. He's also part of the advisory committee for the extractive resources governance programs of the School of Public Policy of the University of Calgary. He's a senior fellow in COMEXI, the Mexican Council of International Affairs. And well, obviously he was deputy secretary on the government of Mexico. And thank you very much, Leonardo, and welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Miguel. And most importantly, I have the privilege of being friends with Miguel and friends of Canada. It's an amazing opportunity for me to be here and share the floor with Julie and Shannon, in particular from the government of Canada and Alberta, and certainly with these two amazing professionals, Benjamin and Mariana. So thanks very much to the Canadian Council and Miguel for this invitation. And perhaps let me start by saying that, of course, I agree with everything that my colleagues have been saying. But let me stress one point. Canada and Mexico already share a strong partnership. And that is bilaterally, but also trilaterally. And that's reinforced by the CUSMA, USMCA, Mexico, US-Mexico, Canada agreement. So that creates a stable and predictable investment framework. So despite of the noise that you can see in social media or in other places, there are few countries that have this institutional architecture. And those countries today are Mexico, US, and Canada. So in that regard, I think we should be proud, but also recognize that stability and that predictability, it's part of what makes North America that competitive. Now, the second point that I would like to make is about the energy transition. And certainly, as we have heard, there have been different changes, not only in Mexico, but also in the US and Canada. And it's completely normal. This is part of a cycle of, a democratic jurisdiction has these different cycles where there's a change in policies, a change in regulation, but ultimately we do have this investment framework that supersedes the local changes and also provide that stability that it's required for infrastructure sectors. So that's a magnet for foreign investors, but in particular, we are looking into opportunities for the renewable energy and infrastructure modernization in Mexico. And perhaps the third point is certainly the new legislation in the energy sector, but in other sectors as well. It's introducing new dynamics, and investors must navigate those dynamics with strategic adjustments. But Mexico's energy sector can be consolidated as a prime destination for Canadian investment, which, as of now, we have observed a lot of movement from Canada to Mexico and from Albertan companies to Mexico. And this is another opportunity to actually galvanize and cement all of these different two-way streets that we have been observing across the different years, starting with the Canada-Mexico partnership and then certainly the USMCA. So those are my first three comments. We have this institutional architecture. There are plenty of opportunities domestically and international because of the dynamics for reducing the environmental footprint of the energy sector. And thirdly, there are opportunities to put a lever on domestic legislation and policy to leverage the institutional architecture that we have across North America. And in particular, for Canadian investors in Mexico, let me say that renewable energy investment today, it's part of this global initiative where Mexico aligns with tripling renewable energy capacity and doubling energy efficiency, which is part of what has been agreed upon last year in the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, COP, or Conference of the Parties. So Mexico adhered to this institutional framework. In Mexico, we also, besides that commitment, we do have a strong demand for renewable energy that has been put forward by the new administration, relaxing a little bit of the barriers that were put in the previous administration. So today, we would be looking into more solar, more wind, more hydro projects. And in particular, hydro, it's a great area of opportunity for Canadian firms to excel. And the other part, which is interesting, is the government has interest in developing public-private partnership. And that provides an entry point for investment in clean energy infrastructure. So, Shannon and Julie have been advancing these different opportunities, but the legal framework is there. The institutional architecture across the region is there. There's domestic and international demand. Certainly, there are a few challenges, but those challenges can be overcome with a little bit of tweaking in the secondary legislation and the regulation that it's coming after today's publication in the official Gazette. For instance, there's preferential treatment of the national utility, CFE, or Pemex, as well, the national oil company. That could limit certain market opportunities. However, there's also a creation of a space for a specialized partnership in, for instance, in the power sector, in transmission or distribution or renewable energy projects, which, if you are not as familiar with the Mexican jurisdiction, Canadian investors can come and explore joint ventures with local firms to leverage those market entry opportunities. No? Second, for instance, there are some aspects of the legislation that introduce a little bit of uncertainty regarding government intervention powers in energy assets. Yeah, that's a challenge, but clear definitions and engagement in Mexico's energy policy can raise the flag and actually help establish a strong legal protection for foreign investment. Today, they are looking into developing this regulation and guidelines. And the closer that we work with the administration, the better and easier would be for private investors to come in and make sure that their investments would be protected under the legal framework that it's in place. Or the last point, for instance, it's certainly there's a lot of noise about what's happening under the USMCA agreement and international standards, but Canadian firms should work through bilateral trade mechanisms, trilateral trade, and international trade mechanisms to make sure that this legal framework that it's in place, this institutional architecture that many other jurisdictions do not enjoy, are working to the advantage of Canadian, Mexican, and US companies. And with that, let me stop there, Miguel, and thanks very much for the invitation.
Thank you, Leonardo. Thank you very much. Now we continue with Benjamin TORRES-BARRON. Benjamin Torres leads Baker McKenzie Energy, Mining, and Infrastructure Practice Group in Mexico, and he's a member of the EMI Global Steering Committee at the firm. He joined Baker McKenzie in 1998. He's a recognized highly regarded lawyer, and is also listed by the Who is Who Legal for Oil and Gas and Project Finance in Mexico. Benjamin is the president of the Energy Committee of the ANCHA Mexico, the American Chamber in Mexico. In addition, he has lectured for the Energy and Sustainable Law Master's degree at the Universidad Autónoma de Nuevo León. And what has an amazing curriculum. And thank you, Benjamin, for being here. And the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you again, Miguel, for inviting me. And I really thank you for the opportunity to dialogue and have this interesting conversation and chat with some friends and colleagues. It's really nice to see some familiar faces that haven't had the chance to coincide in a couple of months or maybe years after the pandemic. And I think, the conversation and the introduction that Leonardo gave us and share to the public, it was the perfect segue for me to elaborate on what we're seeing on the energy sector. And I think the energy sector has a deep and a very important significance, not only for the economy of our country, but also for the ideology. And it's a very sensitive issue for most of us, the Mexicans. It's always a topic that is over the discussion of the business tables, that is all over the newspaper and all over the news, and is always a matter for us to discuss. What are the opportunities? I think I am coming from the last presidential term. I do recall what Julie was mentioning about how things and how the approach with the current Mexican government has improved significantly, and I completely agree. I think there's an opportunity to have more dialogue with the government officials. I think there is a relevance and a priority by the new government to create new business opportunities for both private investors, whether they are the local investors or they are foreign nationals. And I think one of the most important signs is the creation of this new energy reform package, which consists on 8 new completely different laws that abrogate the last laws that were in force and enacted under President Peña Nieto administration. And there are 3 amendments to other laws that likewise were published and enacted by President Peña Nieto. So we are looking about 11 different laws that are becoming mandatory. I think we can have a huge discussion for hours on the scope of this reform, but I really like the way that Leonardo summarized it. And one of the things we have to keep in mind is that these new laws, number one, do not differ significantly on the prior laws that were enacted by President Peña Nieto. I've been reviewing most of them, and they do contain significant similarities with the prior laws. However, they do differentiate and they do become distant on some of the principles that this new government is seeking for. And one of this is the preferential benefit that is given to the public entities is by converting and by transitioning Pemex and CFE to become again public entities with a public and social mandate as a priority, and the fact that the spirit and the scope of all these laws are aligned in order to facilitate a combination and an alliance between private and public companies, but knowing that the public company now, instead of having an economic essential mandate as the state productive entities, Pemex and CFE, were at the time in the term of President Peña Nieto, now because they're public, they have a different priority. They have a different priority to have and seek for energy security, energy independence, and social welfare, among other things. And with that, there is a combination to create alliances, JVs, whether that is in the oil and gas business or in the power business, where CFE and Pemex will combine their efforts with private parties, again, whether those are foreign nationals or local nationals, where they can create value and they can endeavor into different associations and alliances for seeking projects and creating infrastructure for producing oil and gas and electricity within our country. Something else that it is important to mention is the transition of the current organism, which is the Mexican Energy Regulatory Commission, the CRE, or the Comisión Reguladora de Energía, which was the regulator, as well CNH, the National Hydrocarbon Commission. Now they are transiting and becoming part of the Ministry of Energy. They will become bodies that are part by itself of the Ministry of Energy, and that includes the creation of the new CNE, Comisión Nacional de Energía, by the different name, which obviously will have technical independence and autonomy, but it will depend for different reasons and will be controlled by the Ministry of Energy. This is in a way good thing, but it's also a bad thing because it's no longer independent, and it will not be able to take independent decisions, and then the political mandate, the political vision of the current administration will be able to regulate and sometimes to govern the decisions of this regulatory body. Why do I see that there is an improvement, and why do I definitely see there is room of opportunity for all of our investors? If we go back to the pandemic times, aligned with the strict policy that Andrés Manuel López Obrador government had, the doors were shut for the investors. There was no dialogue. There was no opportunity to provide feedback. Leonardo mentioned that there's an opportunity to provide very good feedback on the scope of these new laws. And there were practically no permits for generation, or the CNH was completely collapsed in terms of developing the opportunity to creating more rounds and more opportunities to produce more oil and gas into the country. I think the scope of this new law will and certainly will provide some opportunities in certain areas where either you associate with the government and create these alliances, or else there are specific opportunities where private parties can independently participate. And one of them that I like very much in terms of where we're coming from, relatively speaking, is the opportunity now to grant permits for generation for power projects that are below 20 megawatts. And they have a fast track or expedite permit process. It is pending to know exactly what the fast track process is, of course. And I think Leonardo mentioned that the secondary laws and the regulations of the secondary laws and the guidelines and the different provisions that will be enacted after these secondary laws are published in the Federal Official Gazette, I think we'll have a good window of opportunity to provide feedback, but also to understand in fine detail the actual scope of the reform. I think right now we only know the principles, and I think as well that the secondary legislation and with the revelation on all these ancillary legislation that will be published and enacted is where we will be able to know for sure with more certainty what the actual intent and the scope of the reform will be on those regulations. But at least right now we know that companies will be able to generate power privately under 20 megawatts. I am thinking that this is a very good opportunity for industrial parks. This is a very good opportunity for shopping malls. This is a very good opportunity for specific clusters of activity where you can privately generate in accordance with the rules, power projects and satisfy the desperate consumption needs that we have to say and recognize. During the last presidential term, many projects were not able to survive because of the lack of power supply. And hopefully this will be one of the gateways and doors that should be open in order to foster and to land some of the desperate projects that we need for the manufacturing and industrial industry. Another one is the ability to increase from 0.5 to 0.7 generation projects without a permit, without the need to having a permit. And I do see the opportunity for small scale projects where really by increasing this threshold, they can automatically generate on their own without the need to go through a permitting process before the CRE, which again, under the last term, there were many projects that were in tandem on delay, just waiting to be approved. And there was a lack of response from that authority. So there are many ways to look at the glass half empty or half full. I prefer to look at half full in terms of what I'm seeing and I saw and I experienced in the last term. I do think that Mexico desperately needs private investment, particularly infrastructure, and many of the Canadian companies, which I have worked with in the past, I think they will have a great opportunity to deploy their resources, their know-how, their experiences, particularly into the energy and infrastructure sector, and bring value to desperate need for power. The power hunger that exists in our country, I think, in the last couple of years has been to the extreme, and I think we need to find a solution very soon. And I see a lot of business opportunity by delivering these solutions to the specific off-takers that they need electricity supply in order to have a successful experience within our country. And I think that is being addressed. Maybe as a closing argument, I think I'm curious to see how the renewal or the renegotiation, as we might think of the USMCA might arise. I think it's important also to discuss that. I think that will have a critical role and impact on many of the situations that rule in our country right now. One of them will be the final scope of the energy reform package, and I think also with hope I see that will be a good way to leverage the judicial reform. The judicial reform is something else that creates a concern for investors in Mexico, and there are solutions. We have to see how the elections are by summer of this year, and what is the profile of the judges that will become elected. But that is another area that I think it's important for us to discuss, that will have a critical effect on not only in the energy business, but in the different private investments that are being managed in Mexico for both nationals and foreigners. I think that my time is up, Miguel, but I really thank you for the opportunity for discussing with all of you some of my thoughts on the energy reform. Back to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Benjamin, and thank you everyone for the opening comments. And right now, I think, Michael, if we can bring we're going to prioritize the questions from the public. I see there are some, so please.
For sure. Thank you, Miguel. All right, so we've got a couple of questions. I think one is to all panelists. What is the status of the private participation on exploration and production of oil and gas? Any changes that you may foresee for the benefit of private investment participation? So whoever would like to answer first, please do so.
Leonardo, you want to tackle that? I think generally I broadly spoke about that. Maybe you want to jump in some aspects, or I can repeat or elaborate on that.
Sure.
As you might wish.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a new program, the National Development Plan, which was published yesterday, and that creates this umbrella for the different policies that should the new government develop in the coming sexennium, in the coming 6 years. And with that, there's an indication of the different priorities that would be focusing the administration. And one of those priorities is sustainability, and within sustainability, the energy sector. So that's one thing that we should all keep in mind. Second, perhaps let me go a little bit into the nitty-gritty, and let me add to what Benjamin has just mentioned. In the power sector, there's an opportunity to invest in storage, batteries. They are foreseeing to promote the development of renewable energy, variable renewable energy. That means wind, solar, wind and solar in particular. And with those two resources, they are mandating the need to couple that with batteries to have 24/7 provision of renewable energy power. So there would be, with that vision, there would be ample of opportunity to provide different technologies to cement that new vision. And certainly there you have the demand implemented for these new technologies. And in the oil and gas sector, another component that was introduced into this strategy of the hydrocarbon sector is that they will focus on how to reduce the environmental footprint of that sector, in particular Pemex. So they would be focusing on how to develop clean energy fuels, and that means hydrogen, ammonia, or methanol. And the other part is in which Albertan companies are really at the forefront is solution gas conserved. So how can you reduce the methane emissions coming from the different assets of the hydrocarbon sector? And I think that's a great opportunity for Canadian companies. I think I will leave it there, but certainly happy to continue the conversation here.
Thank you, Leonardo.
And maybe I just circle around that. Again, I did speak about the possibility to create alliances and associations and JVs with Pemex. In alignment to what Leonardo said, we have to wait how the secondary regulations will be precising on that. I think it will be somewhat premature for us to tell you exactly how is that going to be tailored, but really the spirit of creating those alliances that are there and working directly with Pemex and create value for it. And there's a possibility to have tenders under the typical rules that you know, public tenders, direct awards, invitation to 3 parties. So you'll see those opportunities to work and come back working with Pemex on that front. Something I didn't mention earlier is also the publication of the tax incentives for immediate depreciation in investments that are related to oil and gas and power. There is a possibility to have a conversation about that specifically. I'm happy to elaborate later time or offline on this. But technology investments that are dedicated to these 2 industries, among others, now have been fostered by the current government, and they will create some tax incentives on that. And I think it's important also to follow that. There are some strict criteria and rules. They have to be approved by an ad hoc committee that will be created or has been created for that. But that also, I think, comes into equation that and shows that the government has interest in bringing investments into these industries as opposed to the last couple of years. Thank you, Miguel.
Thank you, Benjamin. So yeah, Shannon, you had your hand up there. I think you are also seeing some of the other questions come in. Would you like to address some of those?
Thank you, because it looks like there are quite a number focused on energy, but I'm also conscious that we've lost a few participants in the last couple of minutes here. When we're looking at public-private partnerships, I think that's still something to be cautiously optimistic about in general. And I think it's really important to talk to us before, like talk to everyone. You've now met with us as panelists here. It's good to learn about what you're getting into. I think there are opportunities as far as the infrastructure demands, both on energy production and infrastructure in general in Mexico. And one needs to look at how best to do that in order to realize success from the Albertan perspective. There does seem to be an openness to microgrids. There does seem to be an openness to potentially generation of energy for direct use. There has always been a hesitancy with connecting to the larger grid from CFE. And so there does seem to be some movement there, but I would say one needs to go in with their eyes wide open. It's good to be targeted. It's good to look at infrastructure. It might be good to look subnationally, developing relationships at the state level. It's something we're doing as a province, and we have found some inroads in figuring out how to help individual states be better prepared to receive investment. Also looking at the cluster structure. That is, we in Alberta have chambers of commerce, and we tend to navigate around sectors based on those connections, whereas what seems very common in Mexico are industry clusters. So you might interact with the aerospace cluster, or you might interact with the energy cluster, but you can find inroads there to work with industry directly in order to realize some success. I think there are some questions about dealing with Pemex. One needs to proceed with caution and potentially find in-market partners. So that there is a sharing of risk. And I do want to address Vanessa Strickland's questions related to universities, because I think there are some applied research opportunities and some training and some interactions and exchange opportunities possible. I'm not sure if it will look like what it looked like prior to 2018. And we are still waiting to see what kind of funding or what kind of relationships will be possible, even coming into this administration. I would say that what we're seeing, what is being signaled, is that there is more of an openness to research, and there is more of an openness to innovation. And so I see, Vanessa, that there might be some opportunities to re-explore those kinds of agreements and convenios to develop research on both sides.
Thank you very much, Shannon. All right, so I think that about covers the majority of our questions. We do have a couple more. There was one about oil exploration day. I know that, again, it goes back to the oil and gas theme, but I know that that's an important thing and for future partnerships. Would somebody be able to comment on that? That is part of that area.
You mean about the expropriation day? Is that the one you're talking about, Michael?
Yeah, expropriation.
Well, today is the anniversary of the expropriation day, right? And it's I mean, it's an important date which commemorates the anniversary of the independence of the oil and gas industry in Mexico, in a way. I think the government celebrates that because of the relevance that Pemex as a state-owned entity has over the economy and the autonomy and the identity of the oil and gas and the energy industry in Mexico. I understood, and we were hoping, and we heard that the new package of the energy secondary laws was going to be published today. We were still checking with the Federal Official Gazette. It has not occurred just yet, but it will happen anytime soon. I think is going to be a perfect announcement for the government to share the new energy reform package. And obviously, but then in connection with what is happening right now, well, it will set out with the publication of the new energy package, the possibility, at least will cement, using Leonardo's words, the possibility to create value and helping Pemex to implement associations between private parties and Pemex itself. So that is, I think, the context and the pillar for the future of partnership between private companies and Pemex. I think that's
Perhaps
that's
just to complement Benjamin comment, Michael, I think with the new legislation, there are provisions to partner with the state-owned companies. And that's a good opportunity. Again, as Shannon was saying, and Julie, certainly you have to be cautious on how are you engaging with the different stakeholders. But for sure, they have developed these provisions to allow for a public-private partnership. So that's a given. The second point that I would like also to mention is the financial situation of the state-owned companies today is very difficult. So if there are no complementing resources to develop the different assets and the different fields and the like in the oil and gas sector, but also in the power sector, there would be a natural constraint that we will be facing, and that would have a damaging effect for the dynamic of the Mexican economy. So because of that, those constraints, that opens up the possibility to come for private investors to come in and complement the efforts of the state-owned companies. And perhaps the third point is that given the provision and the structure that they are setting up artificially, they are mandating that the state-owned companies have the prevalence over any particular stakeholder in that sector. And because of that, there's I think there's a reduced risk for looking into threats of the private sector coming and operate in oil and gas or in power or in transmission or in any other opportunity. So there's a need from the economic-wide perspective. There's the legal framework that creates that opportunity. And politically, there's no threat for an incoming private participant to push out the prevalence of the state-owned companies. So because of all these reasons, I think today it would be easier than in the previous administration to come and galvanize the opportunities that we are looking at.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all. And I want to close the event today with a final question for all of you. Just one question, 30 seconds to answer if you don't mind. But how do you consider that we can, or what kind of advice you can give to Canadian companies that want to go to Mexico, and on how to intensify and to approach Mexico and to have real opportunities and just to go to business, and how we can help Canadian companies to diversify markets and just to enter in the Mexican market? What could be your advice to Canadian companies? Mariana, maybe you can start if you like.
Thank you, Miguel. Well, I think that the most important thing is to keep updated to what's going on. There are so many things happening that having a clear idea, an objective idea of what things are going on is very relevant. So knowing what are the government initiatives that are happening, how the business is feeling, how the business chambers are working, I think having that local contact is the best that a foreign company can do before it makes a decision. There's nothing like knowing how others are living that and know from people on the ground how things could look like for people in or for companies in that sector.
Excellent. Thank you. Julie, do you want to say something?
Yeah, well, I wanted to pick up on something that Shannon said. I think it was Shannon to say we have a lot in common between Canada and Mexico, and we have the infrastructure. And I think Leonardo also touched on this. We have the infrastructure around, like the framework to facilitate collaboration. So, I mean, like in any commercial relationship, taking time to come down here and meeting face to face and all that is always very, very important. But take advantage of the framework that we have and the services that we have, the Trade Commissioner service. We have, for example, in agriculture and agri-food, one of the largest teams in the world here, established here. Same thing in the energy sector. And yes, just taking the opportunity of this shout out, we didn't have time to touch on the mining sector, which same is also seeing a number of changes for the better after 66 difficult years. So I'll respond directly in the chat. And same thing for the Indigenous person who wrote about some art organization and opportunities related to that. We're seeing a lot of, and that's building on the people-to-people, the strong relationships that we have. So I'll answer on the chat on that.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Leonardo, 30 seconds, just final comments.
Yeah, certainly. Well, let me complement by saying that the demand is there. So that's a given, and that's let me quote a famous economic philosopher: demand creates its supply creates its own demand. In this case, in Mexico, the demand is there, so we really need just to develop the supply. The second point is Mexico's market size, the regional trade benefits, and the policy evolution create an environment where proactive investors can thrive. And the last point is also echoing Julie's and Shannon's, and certainly Mariana and Benjamin, engaging early in partnerships and policy discussions will secure long-term advantages for Canadian energy firms. And I would say, if you are a small or a medium energy company and you would like to come and develop a project in Mexico, the demand is there. You should reach out to Julie and Shannon, and then certainly they can connect you with the key people like Mariana and Benjamin. And once you are there, certainly like when you go to any restaurant and have lunch, the menu is there, but it's up to you to choose what to eat and who are you sitting with. So with that, thanks very much, Miguel. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be with Mariana, Julie, Shannon, Benjamin, and yourselves, Michael and Miguel.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Good closing. Benjamin, 30 seconds, please.
Thanks, Miguel. Well, being the last one, I have to confess that most of my friends and colleagues, they took most of my ideas and recommendations, but I really like what they said. Maybe I can use what I said as a recap, because I'm going to collect and pick up what you already said, and maybe I will just transmit it this way. You have to do your homework, and by doing your homework is that you have to understand the country, you have to understand the rules of the game, you have to understand the whereabouts and how to approach it, right? I do agree that Canada and Mexico are very similar countries, and they are doing business for many, many years with our different commercial trading agreements. But also there are some significant difference too, culturally, and even the language is a language barrier. So I would pick up on what you most have said and in preparing yourself. And by that, you need to build your network. And building your network is picking up and identify who do you want to partner with, who are the different service advisors that you need, the accountants, your lawyers, the different service providers that you want to engage, and even your own talent that you want to hire for the local presence in Mexico. And going back to what Leonardo said, you know, I like that example about the menu, because it's not only about picking up who you want to partner with, picking up on what or who are going to be your advisors, but also identifying those that you don't want to be doing business with as well, and those relationships that you don't want to keep. And I think that's part of getting deep into Mexico and gaining as much knowledge before taking the critical decision. So I think there's some background work and context that you need to carry on before taking the decision, because that will allow you to take a more informative and most a better known and business intelligence decision on what you want to do in Mexico. Those are my 2 cents for you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Benjamin. Finally, Shannon, your message to Alberta companies to close.
Thank you, Miguel. Benjamin, penúltimo. And I think I will say that the word for me that's the most important takeaway is commitment. Because you can't just come into Mexico and do it a little bit and then hope something happens somewhere else. It's good to be committed to this market and devote some time and effort. And I think that, you know, you have some of the right people on this panel here today, and I feel very privileged to have shared this panel with you all. I think exploring the market, everyone said all of the important things, and someone did ask about if there was a fair coming up, and I do have to do a shameless plug, and that's for Congreso Mexicano de Petróleo, and it's in June, from June 18th to 21st. If you're in that sector, reach out to Benigno and Antonina, who are on the call, and find out more about it. But I think commitment from the perspective of relationships are important in this market too. And it's important to get to know with whom you're working. And it's just as Leonardo said, you go to the restaurant, but it's important to choose what you're going to eat and with whom you're going to share it. And I think that's a really important aspect of building that relationship in this market, and also having this market be the gateway to your next explorations, internationalizing and finding diverse markets for your product or service. And thank you, Miguel, and thank you, CCA.
Thank you very much, everyone. Well, thank you. With this, we conclude this Qué Pasa in Mexico, areas of opportunity. And I want to invite all our network in CCA we are planning an event for an in-person event. It's a social networking on April 9, it's a Wednesday. And also we are planning the CCA Breakfast of the Americas during the Global Energy Show. This is going to be in June 11, 12. And we look forward to see you around. Thank you very much. Have a great day. And thank you very much all of the panelists today. Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you. Gracias. Hasta luego.
Gracias. Buenas tardes. Bye.